Yes, okay, thank you. All right, so here I already set down the topics that you a bit mentioned already. The first is to give an overall picture of the Finnish integration model, and then discuss the effectiveness of integration measures in the light of recent research results. Then present some new approaches in labour market integration policies and measures in Finland currently. And then finally discuss some challenges for effective integration policies. And first, some numbers. This is a bureaucrat talking. So until 1990, the migration to Finland was very limited. You can see from the chart there that 1990, there were 6,500 foreign nationals immigrating to Finland. That was the time when Somalis came to Finland as refugees. Since then, the numbers have grown steadily, and we've reached, there was a doubling of immigration from 2000 to 2010, which was of a more fast growth. And now we are on a more steady path, so to say. Main grounds for immigration are family ties, work, and studies. The family ties having about 30% share of the residence permit issued to non-EU citizens, and then a bit more than a quarter for studies and work. So international protection has configured approximately only 10% of immigration until last year. After this refugee, if not crisis, then wave, or if you will. And now, because of that, I would say that the international protection would probably make 20-30% of the last year's residence permits, and the effects will be still seen this year. But the numbers have been going down, significantly down, and we will be, I would say this is temporary situation, and we'll go down to our regular numbers quite soon. So altogether, there are currently 230,000 foreign citizens or 330,000 foreign language speakers residing in Finland. So while numbers are still relatively small in international comparison, rapid employment and utilization of migrants' know-how are of critical importance. However, the overall aim of the integration policy is to enable immigrants' extensive participation in Finnish society, all spheres of life. So the Finnish integration model. According to several experts and extensive research, the participation in the labour market is one of the most significant factors favoring integration into society. In Finland, successful labour integration will also counter some of the adverse effects of population aging. And the graph there, you can see the migrant population. The year of immigration, the year of immigration there on the right. So you can see that every cohort that we've had has a similar age structure. Migrants are mostly in very favorable age in regard to labor market and fertility. Because of this very close connection between employment and integration, it is the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment that is responsible for the integration of immigrants in Finland. The legislation on integration became into force in 1999, and it is then that the concept of integration plan was introduced. So the Finnish integration model, probably very similar to what other countries in Europe also have. I'd be happy to hear what other models or processes there are. So the model can be seen as consisting of 3 stages or steps. And the first step, the initial assessment, this is where migrants' education, work experience, and language skills will be evaluated. And then based on this preliminary evaluation, the measures and services are assessed that are needed for one's favorable integration and employment. This initial assessment is started by the municipality for those who are outside workforce, for example, stay-at-home parents or students, and by the employment and economic development offices for the majority of newcomers. The employment and economic development offices, they conduct approximately 90% of the initial assessments. Then the step 2 is the integration plan. And this is where the details of the measures will be drawn based on the initial assessment. This integration plan must be created no later than 3 years after registering residence in Finland. So the integration process and policy is really designed for those who have entered the country just recently. Once again, the integration plan is prepared with a counselor at an employment office or at the municipal social office for those not entering the labor force. And the maximum duration for an integration plan is 3 years, but it can be extended on individual grounds to 5 years, for example, on the grounds of pregnancy or so. And once the integration plan is in force, one can obtain labor market subsidy, and adherence to the plan is prerequisite for receiving the subsidy. So the step 3 is the actual integration training. So there's first assessment where skills and background and work history are evaluated. Then you get the more detailed plan of the actual measures that will help your integration. And then the step 3 is the integration training. This is a common module for all, And this integration training includes first language studies, Finnish or Swedish, because Swedish is also an official language in Finland, and social, cultural, and life management skills. And these two make up for approximately 1 year course. Then, if necessary for illiterate, there can be, or there will be, then reading and writing skills or adult comprehensive schooling for those without school leaving certificate. And then integration training can often, or will actually often, include vocational or practical training, preparatory vocational training, completing previous studies, or a recognition of a previously acquired degree. And here is that the training, rough model of the training, integration training. So to the left, you'd first have that initial assessment box, and then the integration plan box, and then you'd enter this third phase for the actual training. And on the left, there is the language and cultural training at approximately 1 year. The standard process kind of would be to then move on to vocational training and then employment. However, there is not clearly enough vocational training targeted at migrants, so many need to go for preparatory courses for vocational training first, which also lasts for 1 year. So this makes it actually quite a long path, especially for those who have been waiting for residence permit already maybe for a year. This all opens up as a possibility for those who have legal residence in Finland. Then the third path, so to say, would be like the studying path, where you can either have your previous degree recognized. It is required, for example, in healthcare in Finland, or then you can complete previous studies. and have this integration subsidy for this. And then initially also you would end up in employment ideally. Of course, you might still need some extra courses to qualify for the Finnish labor market. About that more later. So what do we know about the integration measures in light of the research results? First, due to the small number and late arrival of immigrants, research on this topic is still not very extensive. However, Finland has a large reserve of registered data, and research carried out about integration measures is quite considerable significance even internationally. Some of the more recent research includes Mr. Sarvimäki's Integrating Immigrants, the impact of restructuring, ALMP, which is this integration plan actually. I think that is short for assimilation labor market plan. I believe this is author's translation, and we do not use the word assimilation officially, but instead the integration. Then there are two that are in Finnish, employment and income of migrant PS customers and immigrants as recipients of social benefits. And the summary of key findings from these would be that, well, first, research, not just this, but I would say that all research on this topic show that without exception, employment of migrants improves significantly over longitudinal period. Secondly, work experience acquired in Finland is the main predictor for employment, and quite strongly so that more than 3 years of acquired work experience in Finland increases the income by more than 40% over a 10-year period. Also, according to registered data analysis, it is quite clear that short-term employment significantly increases the likelihood of achieving permanent employment later. Unfortunately, one of the findings or conclusions to be drawn is that Finnish labor market is highly ethnicized and gendered for migrants. So therefore, men and migrants from EU and other Western countries are much more likely to find work that corresponds to their qualifications, and women and migrants from non-OECD countries considerably less so. And as well as employment, income of migrants also increase over time. And the graph shows again the year of immigration with the different colored lines. And then on the left, the numbers represent what is the share or the percentage of migrant income relative to Finnish citizens' income. What you can see is that the orange line, which is the migrants who came in early 1990s, they have started much lower than the later migrants. This might possibly demonstrate that that it is easier for migrants to enter labor market, maybe because we are more used to having migrants. Also, economic situation differs, but I believe there is something of that kind of assimilation that we Finnish people have. We have been able to accept migrants more as part of the labor force. Also, you can see that whereas the level of income for those who arrived early 1990s, it took about, numbers might be too small, but it took about 12 years to reach the same income level than for those of the latest cohort at what they achieved after 6 years. Also, there are findings specifically related to integration legislation or the effect of it, and especially the adoption of the integration plan. And research shows that since the adoption of the integration plan, the immigrant income has increased by 47% and decreased social benefits received by 13% within a 10-year period. And these effects are interpreted by author to result from the changed content of integration measures, so that there is less traditional, more general kind of job-seeking counseling and more emphasis on language and vocational training. Also, the findings indicate that because it's often assumed that those coming with asylum or refugee profile or family unification grounds for those with those who have come with asylum, that their employment unemployment is much higher and income levels are lower, like permanently. However, the findings indicate that on grounds, those who have immigrated on grounds of studying, marriage, or spousal employment, their income did not differ from those having arrived on refugee, asylum, or family unification criteria when other factors had been controlled for. And finally, what research tells about the public employment service measures. The most effective PES measure seems to be vocational degree that is acquired in Finland. It has an effect of 30% income increase, again over a 10-year period. And somewhat alarming maybe is the finding that whereas participating in specific training modules for immigrants has a positive effect on income accumulation, then the effect of a more general job-seeking counseling, in fact, is negative. And then to these, some of the new approaches to integration policies and measures we have currently. First, there is the investment impact model. This, I don't know if any one of you are familiar with it, and I'd be happy to hear from the experience, because this is something totally new. It means that a private sector operators provide the integration services, and then they are reimbursed with profit if the predetermined employment targets are reached. I believe this has been experienced in UK, and I don't know if there are any from UK still here. So would love to hear how it has worked out. This model consists of language training of 4 months, which used to be 1 year, and then employment in partner companies and simultaneous language training. And later there will be an impact analysis carried out to determine the benefits and or adverse effects of the model. Then secondly, not really a new element in itself, but something we have been emphasizing more in Finland recently in integration process is combining vocational and language training. So there is now more training available that for care assistants, car mechanics, bus drivers, construction workers that combine language training and vocational training. Also then not really a new in itself, but again something we've been trying to develop more is the skills or know-how recognition, so that it would be carried out more frequently, because earlier it was mainly carried out for those in certain professions, for example in healthcare. also more extensively in the sense of we try to find methods to recognize informal know-how. This is still very much in developing, and then try to standardize the process with regard to quality aspect. Then there's something that current administration has initiated, the regional needs evaluation. It is still under development, but the aim is to match refugees' skills with regional labor shortages, which means assessing the professional skills of asylum seekers at reception centers while they are awaiting their asylum decisions. And then, based on the outcomes of assessment, the settlement area of the asylum seekers will be taken into consideration so that it would match the education and business opportunities of that area. Obviously, challenges still remain. First, as been demonstrated by research, the work experience acquired in Finland is a main factor for immigrant employment, and therefore foreign public employment sector customers may need to be encouraged to accept work that is not matching their expertise or qualifications and that is outside their current residence. There has been some discussion about labor subsidies for employing migrants in early phase of immigration, but this scheme has not yet been carried out so far. Apprenticeship has been proven to be a very effective path for employment for migrants, but there's a considerable shortage of apprenticeships, presumably because the incentives for small and medium-sized businesses are insufficient. Also, there is a vast shortage of language courses combining work-oriented activities, which would expedite transition to employment. Secondly, unfortunately, related to that first point, work experience acquired in Finland being the main factor in employment, it seems that foreign degrees have very limited effect on employment, and employers seem to have relatively low regard for foreign degrees. Nevertheless, there is a vast shortage of vocational training targeted for migrants, and of utmost importance would be that we'd be able to develop alternative assessment methods for prior learning for those without documentary qualifications. And then third factor, not in any particular order, is the labor market rigidity. Many professions in Finland require recognition of the foreign credentials before allowing migrants to work in the job that they have been trained for. In general, Finland, I would say, is quite qualification intensive, or has a rather qualification intensive labor market, meaning that even very low entry jobs, formal qualifications are needed often. For example, cleaning and so on, then employers expect you to have a diploma or official qualification. Also, there's considerable controversy on targeted entry subsidies, and women remain underutilized as in terms of their know-how and skills, since the entry to the employment is more difficult. And then there is the process rigidity, starting from the long processing periods for permits, especially for asylum seekers, and then add up that lengthiness of the official integration path, minimum 3 years, obviously delays employment. Another obstacle or challenge is that the grand designs made in the ministry, for example, they don't necessarily meet at the service execution or grassroots level. And we are not able to monitor this very efficiently at the moment. Then again, that beside official recognition and qualifications, we need flexibility to accommodate individual skills, and therefore need to develop new methods of assessing this informal experience. Other challenges that I'll just go through quickly. I notice my time is over. That Finland is very sparsely populated from halfway upwards to the north. The migration, it has been hoped that migration would be a remedy for those areas, but it seems that these areas have difficulties having migrants stay after this very cost-intensive integration period. They are there for the 3 years when the cost burden is there, and then they tend to migrate to south, to capital city area. And then something that the previous presentation dealt largely is the attitudes and discrimination, and particularly the current political climate is quite challenging. We have, someone mentioned earlier about experiment in Turkey where applications were sent with German name and Turkish name. So we have had similar experiment having the Finnish name and then Russian name and Muslim name, so to say. And so the Russian name, with the Russian name, the person had much less.
So you now have 30 seconds to wrap it up.
All right, okay, yeah, all right. So, but this is pretty much better not continue.
Oh, I should have said it earlier than my 30-second warning. That's it. Thank you very much to our neighbor Villiina, Kazi.